Just curious. In most of the recent Marvel movies, they've shown the middle finger at some point and even hinted at a swear word or two. Would you say this is intentional to get a PG-13 rating? And why would they do that? All right, thanks a lot for the question, Johan. You know what's funny? I've been getting a couple of questions lately about some of the material in the MCU movies. I got an email the other day actually from one guy who's saying there was, in Thor Ragnarok, they had an anus joke. And also there was like a penis joke or something like that. I take my kids to these movies. I take my kids to these movies. How can they put in this objectionable material? And then something like this, like they're giving the finger in these movies and there's some risque stuff in there. Do you think they did that intentionally to get the PG-13 rating? First of all, let's address that PG-13 thing. Do they put in middle fingers, whatever, intentionally just so they can get up to that PG-13 rating? No, because even without any of that stuff, it's going to get a PG-13 rating just for all the violence. People die, and there's deaths, and there's violence. The MCU movies are getting PG-13s with or without the middle finger, right? So let's just be clear about that right up front. It didn't need to put in a middle finger or a devil's anus joke or anything like that in order to get up to a PG-13. These movies are getting PG-13s anyway, just because of the amount of violence in these things. Now, as far as, and you know what? I have to admit a little bit of being out of my league here because I am not a parent. I don't have a kid. So let me throw that grain of salt right out there, right up front, that I am stepping outside of my zone in trying to talk about parenting when I'm not a parent. So what the hell do I know? But let me just give you my opinion from my perspective, from my point of view, understanding that I'm not a parent. So there's probably a lot that I don't understand. But I do find it a little bit funny when friends of mine or emails I get from people, like, okay, wait a minute. There's a joke in Thor Ragnarok about the devil's anus. And that's the part you're worried about? A movie with slavery and murder and genocide and blades being shoved through people's guts and the world dying, people getting their eyes ripped out, and your concern is a joke about the devil's anus? That's the problem? Now, again, I'm not a parent, so I might be speaking way out of my ass here. Okay, completely. I understand. So I'm admitting that right up front. But from my perspective where I'm sitting that, I have to admit when I'm hearing these concerns, both from friends of mine and from people emailing me, saying like, how can I take my kid to this if they're going to say devil's anus? It's like, wait a minute, time out. You have no problem with Hela taking a 6-foot-long blade and eviscerating another human being and ripping their insides out and murdering thousands of people with scenes with hundreds of dead bodies all around and eyes being gouged out and old men dying and all. None of that's a problem. None of that's a problem whatsoever. They said devil's anus. And so again, admitting my ignorance here because I'm not a parent, maybe my perspective would be completely different if I was a parent. I hope it wouldn't be, but maybe it would. But to me, it kind of seems like we're putting our worries in the wrong place. Like Thor makes a joke about his hammer. Okay, yeah, it's a penis reference joke. I get it. That's why it's PG-13. That's why it's parental guidance and parental discretion is advised, because there is some risque stuff. These are not children's movies. These are movies for the wide general audience. And you as a parent, that's why it says PG-13. It's not a rated G movie. PG-13 does not mean rated G. PG-13 means there's going to be some stuff in this movie that might be okay for your kid and might not be okay for your kid. It's up to you. We advise parental caution, parental guidance. That's why it's PG-13. It's not a G-rated Disney Thumper the Rabbit animated film. That's why it's PG-13. That means there's going to be stuff in this movie that you may find it might be a little bit questionable for your children if you have children. That's why it's PG-13. It's not rated G. You might see people getting killed. You might see big elaborate scenes of violence. There might be a joke about the devil's anus. Like, that's why it's PG-13 and not rated R and not rated G. So, number one, no, they didn't put in the middle finger to get the PG-13 rating because it was already going to get it. And number two, if it's PG-13, I think everything that Marvel has put in these films is perfectly acceptable for a rating that is telling parents there is some parental guidance necessary here because there may be some stuff in this that you may or may not want your kids exposed to. It's not enough to be rated R, but it's PG-13. So that's something that we've all got to embrace and look at. And again, right now, everybody out there who is a parent might be looking at me and going, Campea, when you're a parent, you will think differently. And that might absolutely be true. That I'm fully admitting that may completely be true. But right now, I'm not a parent, so I just kind of look at it that way.